There's a great deal of discussion of numbers in Jewish literature. I want to focus on a very narrow particular point. I would just like to mention as an introduction, people who think of themselves as very sophisticated are skeptical of numbers because they say the numerical count of anything depends upon the scale that you apply to it. How far apart are these two objects? Well, in miles or in meters. And then you get a different answer. But that's not true. There are physically constant numbers that have nothing to do with scale, nothing to do with units. For example, the ratio of size of two objects or other qualities of two objects is not a matter of scale. It's a real physical number. Now, the Jewish tradition, some numbers are more significant than others. There are grades of significance. 7 is a very, very significant number. 10 is a very significant number. As we'll see, 50 is a significant number, and 8 is a significant number. Now, the general explanation of 7 and 8 in a great deal of Jewish literature is this. Our world is built on sevens. That is to say, the world that we live in, the physical world, the social world, the political world, the historical world, is built on sevens. Of course, the world that we live in, the world we're conscious of, the world we operate in, is only one slice of reality. There's another area of reality which we don't perceive, we learn about, but we can't directly access. And from time to time, that beyond breaks into our world and produces some kind of effect. And that's where you pass into the realm of 8. 8 is the one that's beyond 7. That's a fundamental piece of Jewish philosophy. I think I can argue that the 8s that you find in Jewish law are really 7 plus 1. I don't know if I've covered all of them, but the 8s that I know of are not a homogeneous 8, an undifferentiated 8. They break up into a structure of 7 plus 1. And that reflects the fact that there is a unity of 7, and something beyond 7 is something which stands over and above the 7. So, you take, let's say, the 8 nights of Hanukkah. Why are there 8 nights? You say, well, the oil burned for 8 nights, Rabbi. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that, but Beis Yosef asked the following question. The story tells us that they found a cruse of oil sufficient to ignite for 1 night. And it burned for 8 nights. How many nights of miracle burning do you have? 7. So you're going to celebrate the miracle of the oil, not just the burning of the oil, but the miracle of the oil, then really you ought to celebrate it for 7 nights, not 8 nights. That famous question of the Beis Yosef, I am told, has over more than 300 answers. So I'm going because it's a, when you think about it, you think, wow, that's pretty fundamental. We ought to do something about that. But there's another problem about Hanukkah. The Rambam says that people take the word Hanukkah, break it up into Chanu, Kafeh. Kafeh is 25. And Chanu means to come to rest. That the conquest of Jerusalem was completed on the 25th day of Kislev. They went into the temple and cleaned it out, set it up in makeshift fashion as best as they could, and then they lit the menorah. When do you light the menorah? What time of day? Nighttime, beginning of the night. That's when you light the menorah. If Jerusalem was conquered and recaptured on the 25th. And during that day, they cleaned out the temple and set it up. And then lit the menorah. On what date of the month of Kislev did they light the menorah? Well, our days changed their dates at night, right? So they lit it on the night. It was the night of the 26th. Well, that's interesting. When do we start lighting the menorah for our 8 days of Hanukkah? 25th. The 25th, not on the 26th. So the second thing that's sort of out of kilter. Well, one explanation, if I'm not mistaken, goes back to the Prima Gottleib, says that on the first night, you're not lighting because of the miraculous burning of the oil. That's not the purpose of lighting on the first night. The purpose of lighting on the first night is to celebrate the war, particularly the conquest of Jerusalem. And the subsequent 7 nights are to celebrate the miraculous burning of the oil for 7 nights. This 8 dramatically breaks up into 7 and 1. The 7 are dedicated to the miracle of the oil, and the first one is dedicated to the war. Now the Maharal, although he doesn't use this analysis of 8 plus 7 plus 1, but he has a shocking observation. If you look into the prayers of Hanukkah, you have an extra paragraph that's inserted into the Shemona Esrei and into the benching, same paragraph. You look through that paragraph and see what it describes. It says absolutely nothing at all about the miracle of the oil. Nothing. Doesn't say it and doesn't hint at it. Nothing. Zero. Okay, perhaps you could imagine an explanation for that. More shocking is that there's a little dedicatory paragraph that we say before we light the menorah. We're actually doing the mitzvah of lighting the menorah. That paragraph also doesn't hint at the miracle of the oil. Both paragraphs only mention the miracle of the war. Man, the holidays lighting lights, isn't it? You have this whole paragraph that describes all the dimensions of who did it and when it was done and what great benefits God gave us. No mention of the oil. Says the Maharal, according to our sources, if you had been attached to the Maccabees as a military reporter, you would not have seen any miraculous events. The war was fought in strictly natural terms. Strictly natural terms. You'll tell me, according to our literature and according to the Siddur, the other army had more people and more armaments and better trained and so on and so on. So wouldn't it have to be a miracle for the smaller, weaker, and less trained military force to win the war against the greater? No. There are lots of cases where you can imagine that happening, where you know it happened. Right? We who celebrate July 4th remember the bitter defeat of the British, who had a worldwide empire and couldn't beat this ragtag, spontaneous group of untrained, people hiding in the trees. And if the Americans get too proud, they can look about the ignominious defeat in Vietnam, where they were going to threaten to bomb them back to the Stone Age. It didn't work out that way, and they lost the whole thing. A small group of people fighting on its home territory, fighting for its own freedom, often defeats a larger mercenary army that's fighting for money far from its borders. There's something like that going on in the world right now, isn't there? The population of Russia is about 140 million people. The population of Ukraine is 40 million people. The Russians didn't knock it over in 3 weeks, did they? And they're suffering horrific losses, aren't they? So, the war showed nothing miraculous. Now, you know me, so you know I'm counting my words. I didn't say it wasn't a miracle. I said it showed nothing miraculous. The burning of the oil did. Says the Maharal, the one purpose, maybe the key purpose of the burning of the oil, was to induce a person to understand that the war was divine providence, though not an open miracle, was divine providence. What the Ramban calls hidden miracles. So then, breaking up the menorah into 7 and 1, and having the first night for the war and the 7 nights for the oil, makes perfectly good sense. So this 8 naturally breaks up into 7 plus 1. Here's another example. Bris Milah, circumcision, takes place on the 8th day. By the way, animals also can only be sacrificed on the 8th day. 8th day. 8 days of what? Let's figure it out. The kid's born, let's say, at noon on Tuesday. When is he going to have his bris? Next week. At noon on Tuesday. I mean, he could have it any day that Tuesday, but let's say you keep the time straight, right? At noon on Tuesday. The following week, on Tuesday at noon, how old is he?
8 days.
I'm out?
And the following noon, 7 days, yeah.
Actually, it's 7 days, right? Because if he's born on Tuesday at noon, Wednesday at noon, he's 1 day old. Thursday, he's 2 days old. Friday, he's 3 days old. Shabbos, he's 4 days old. Sunday, he's 5 days old. Monday, he's 6 days old. And Tuesday, he's 7 days old. That's how many days old he is. So what do we mean we say on the 8th day? So the Torah says, Ben Shmonas Yomim, he is, so to speak, the child of 8 days. It means he's been alive on 8 days. But that's not how old he is. He's only 7 days old. Here, I think you have a combination of 7 and 8 working together. And one relevant piece of comparison is, on what day do you have your birthday? What do you celebrate on your birthday? Today I am 5 years old. Are you 5 years old? Let's say you were born on January 16th. Now it's January 16th again. How old are you? You are 5 years old because it's the day after the full year of life. If you're born on January 16th, the next year, January 15th, you have now gone through a complete cycle of days. You've covered all the days in the entire calendar. But your birthday is not January 16th. Because you want not to have covered all the days in the calendar, you want to have all the days of the calendar behind you so that you have the whole year behind you. So counting the days behind you is very important. It's a natural count. Being told that the bris milah is on the 8th day and it not being the natural count tells you something else is going on. It's telling you that a 7-day-old thing has touched 8 days. And that's its contact with something that's beyond the 7. And that when you talk about bris milah, you're living in both worlds. You're living in this world, but you're living in this world in such a way that you touch something beyond. When Avram was given the instruction to circumcise himself and all the other of his household, there's considerable, what appears on the surface to be redundancy there. And it says that he and Yishmael were circumcised on the same day. Were circumcised is passive. It means it happened to you. Well, it happened to Ishmael. Abraham circumcised Ishmael, so it happened to him. If you do something to yourself, you could say it happened to you, but it would be very funny. It sort of implies that somebody else is doing it when you say it that way. So the oral tradition picks up on that and says, yeah, that's right. Because God held the knife. Either you take it the way Rashi does, that he was frightened and couldn't be sure that his hand would be steady, so God steadied his hand on the knife. Or you say that the spiritual effect of bris milah bris milah, the covenant of circumcision, where you enter into a certain kind of covenant with the Creator, you can't do that alone. You can't do that from your side only. You can't be a volunteer. Covenant is a two-way agreement. There has to be participation for something outside. And that's why you can't do it in terms of 7. You've got to do it in terms of 8, but 8 applying to the 7, doing something to the 7. Making a mark in the 7 to associate the 7 with the 8, to show the presence of the influence of the 8 on the 7. So again, you have something which is it's an 8, but it's not a pure 8 because it's an 8 that's leaning on a 7. Then you have Sukkot. In Sukkot we have something called Shmini Atzeres. The verse that introduces the celebration of Sukkot, if you read carefully and you have your eyes open and you think, tries to think out of the box. It says, 7 days you should sit in a sukkah. For 7 days you take the lulav and esrog, celebration of 7 days. And on the 8th day, the 8th day? 8th day of what? It's a 7-day holiday. You just told me it was a 7-day holiday. You mean the day after the 7 days? Yeah, that's the day after, sure. Every count comes to an end, and then there are other things after the count. Why do you call it the 8th day? If it's the 8th day, then there are 2 counts. There's the 7, where you sit in the sukkah, and you wave a little of an esrog, you do the various things, which are the sukkahs. But there's another count going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. On the 8th day, it's Shmini Atzeres, you don't sit in the sukkah. You don't wave a little of an esrog. It's definitely not sukkahs. So it's another holiday. Well, we have lots of holidays in the calendar. That's not surprising. But what makes it the 8th day? 8th day of what? There's a midrash, which the Arizal discusses. The midrash says that Shmini Atzeres should have been 50 days after the first day of Sukkot, just like Shavuos is 50 days after the first day of Pesach. There really should have been 2 holidays. Pesach and Shavuos, which is the end of that period, is 1 holiday. And Sukkot, and then Shmini Atzeres, or whatever it would be, finishing that period. That's what should have been, said the Midrash. For some reason the Midrash doesn't mention, it was collapsed into 8 days. But now we're beginning to get a picture of a structure, not just unique. What is 50? 50 is the day after 7 times 7. If you like, you could think of 50 as super 8. It's super 8. It's like a double 8. Now, what that means is that in both cases, in Sukkot, something's going on in 7 days of Sukkot, which then enables the 8th day to do its job, to do what it's supposed to do. The 8th day is the culmination of the prior 7 days. And there, it's definitely, as I told you, the first 7 days you sit in the sukkah and you wave the lulav and esrog, and the 8th day you don't. Now you look into the deeper literature. Some of you are aware that there are ushpizin, there are guests to the sukkah. The 3 patriarchs, Moshe, Aaron, Yosef, and Dovid, if you count in the order that we count. The patriarchs, and Moses and Aaron, and Joseph and Dovid. Is there a guest on the 8th day also? The Zohar says yes, explicitly. in our Siddur, the piece of Zohar is printed, Rabbi Zatzal used to say it, on Shmini Atzeres. And what it says there is that Yaakov is the guest on the 8th day. You'll tell me, but he was also the guest on the 3rd day. Yes, you're right, he was. But on the 8th day, he gets the name Yisrael. You knew that was coming, didn't you? Gets the name Yisrael. And of course, as we have spoken, some of you heard me speak about it, Yaakov and Yisrael are not equivalent names. He was named Yaakov when he was born, and he spent the first period of his life receiving what was his by right, only by taking it away from somebody else. That's why he was born grasping Esau's heel. For the first period of his life, everything that was supposed to be his, he got by taking it away from somebody else. Then he got the name Yisrael, and he went to a different period of life. One of the subwords is Yisrael is Sar, which means like a prince, someone who has leadership and nobility and authority, to whom things flow naturally. Rabbi Soloveitchik, who heard a great deal, so that when Yaakov is being talked about, it talks about failure and exile and suffering. When Yisrael is talking about, it talks about success and nobility and closest to God. So it may be the same personage, but it's not the same role. Now, Yisrael represents the culmination of history. That's what the verse says when his name is added, not changed, but added to. Says this will be, according to the Malbim, your permanent name, your eternal name. So the 7 days of Sukkot express our world. Indeed, the total number of oxen sacrificed in the 6 days of Sukkot, 7 days of Sukkot is 70. 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. 70. And that corresponds to the 70 nations of the world. They represent this world in its lower state. And we represent the world to come, the original state of the Garden of Eden. We are in that higher identity. And the Zohar says something which you find in the Midrash, but the Zohar puts a slightly different emphasis on it. God says to the Jewish people, you and I have been hosting, we together have been hosting the nations of the world. The 7 days of Sukkot are the days when the non-Jews of the world are invited to bring sacrifices in the temple. Now, let's us share together a holiday for ourselves after having hosted them. That means because Baruch Hu says, I've been catering to the needs of the 7-day world, but 8 is a time in which the higher is expressed. And it was expressed by, and that's where you get Yaakov under the name Yisrael, who's the host, and everybody else is a guest under his hostage. So at any rate, you have there, again, the idea that 8 is 7 plus 1. Now, if we talk about Shavuos, we counted 49, and tomorrow night is 50, the one we don't count. Tomorrow night is 50, as I told you when we spoke about this a few weeks ago. Tomorrow night is not the day after 49, a new day, new things. New things are happening, because you finished that, now we're going on to the next. No. It's the result of the counting. The question is, how is it the result of the counting? What does the counting do that makes it possible to arrive at that position of 50? Now, we did mention, I asked you a few weeks ago, said there are two questions about how we count. One question is why we count up rather than down. Sefer Achina talks about that. A lot of Sforim talk about that. But there's another thing. Let's say you get to, see if I can say this in English without taking a position. You get to the day that corresponds to all the fingers on one hand. Which day is that? All the fingers on one hand, right? So it's a day.
Tuesday.
Say, huh?
Oh, you're saying the day of the week.
No. I want the number. It's the fifth day, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Right, but we don't say that. We don't say it's the fifth day. How do we count that day that corresponds to your fingers? Today is?
Day 5.
No. We say today is 5 days. 5 days, not fifth day. It's 5 days. Today is 5 days. You tell that to a clever, uneducated 9-year-old who say, no, it isn't. It's 1 day. Today's not 5 days. It's 1 day. What do you mean it's 5 days? What kind of nonsense is that? What could that possibly mean? We're using cardinal numbers instead of ordinal numbers. When you count things off, you use ordinal numbers. 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th. We're counting 17 days, plural. I know it says yom, but that's because in Hebrew, the words lose their plural endings when they get big enough. But when it's 5, it's chamisha yamim. Not chamisha yom, it's chamisha yamim. Hayom, chamisha yamim, lo omer. You said it to the person who doesn't know what you're talking about, say, sorry, that's just not grammatically correct. 1 day can't be 5 days. So now, I mentioned that to you because Rav Moshe Shapiro asked the question. And then I asked my chavrusa this morning. He and I both studied with Rabbi Soloveitchik in Boston a million years ago. And he heard a shiur from Rabbi Soloveitchik on it. And part of it I was able to get on my own. Let's think about this. There are 2 mitzvahs of counting. One is to count days, and the other is to count weeks. How do you count weeks? Yeah, it's an interesting question, right? Well, let's say the week starts on Monday. So you have the first Monday, the second Monday, which is 8 days, and then the following Monday, where you could say 2 weeks have passed. That's what you would say. 2 weeks have passed. That's true. When you get to the third Monday, 2 weeks have passed. But you wouldn't say, today is 2 weeks of the Omer. What would that mean? Today is 2 weeks? How could today be 2 weeks? But the Torah tells you to count weeks and to count days. Counting days by itself could have been ordinal. 17th, 18th, 19th, that would have been the appropriate way to count days. But now you've got to count weeks also on a day. Today is what? So what do? We make the days plural. Okay, so I think that's a way of accommodating the 2 verses. But then it has its awkwardness, and then the question is, what does it mean? So the same thing that Rabbi Shapiro said, apparently Rabbi Soloveitchik said, I didn't hear this from Rabbi Soloveitchik, my chavrusa did, where he said, you're obviously, each day there's something that comes into existence, and you're gathering them in, you're preserving them. The question is, in this process of getting 1 per day, how many have you accumulated today? On this day, how many do you have in the bag? So you have to see each day as accomplishing something which doesn't go away. It becomes a new reality, and that reality has to link together with other common realities throughout the 49-day period till you get to a whole, which then can justify the 50th day as the day after that 49-day process. Now, if you look into the meditation that we say after the counting, you'll see something registered there which I first heard from the Boston Rabbi of Yerushalayim. And I think the text there registers it very well. He said, as Chazal say, that in Egypt we were in the 49 gates of defilement, Tuma. Yeah, if you can hold the Siddurim, that would be good. So, if you give me what that said, I'll tell you what page it's on.
Is it 284, which is where the county government is?
Well, 280. Oh, let's see. This is a different book. This is okay. Yes, very good. It's on 284. So now he said that Chazal say that we were in the 49 gates of defilement, and there are only 50. So we were on the cusp of being destroyed. That's why we were taken out at that point in time. Now, there are 49 days and then Shavuos. So what do we need to do in order to prepare ourselves for Shavuos? There, the literature says that you have to make a double transition. You have to climb out of Tuma to Tahara, which means purity, and from Tahara you have to elevate yourself to Kedusha, to holiness. So really, for each gate is a double transition. Double transition. How can you do two transitions in one day? Why don't we have 98 days? 49 transitions. So I want to show you that in the text here, number one, it's registered, and number two, I think if you pay careful attention to the text, you can see what the answer is. So this is the third paragraph in the gray on 285. Master of the universe, you commanded us through Moses, your servant, to count the Omer count in order to cleanse us from our encrustations. Okay, in Hebrew is l'taharenu, mitliposenu, umitumosenu, to purify us from the impure. That's statement number one. As you have written, then it quotes the verse, 7 complete weeks, 50 days. Then it says again, this is 6 lines down, so that the souls of your people be cleansed from their contamination. So twice it talks about being cleansed, tahara, from polluting circumstances. That's what you commanded us to do in order to accomplish that. Therefore, may it be your will, Hashem, our God, the God of our forefathers, that in the merit of the Omer count that I have counted today, may there be corrected whatever blemish I have caused in the particular sphere of the day. May I be cleansed and sanctified. Oh ho! Cleansed and sanctified. Double. With the holiness of from above. And through this, may abundant bounty flow to all the worlds, and may it correct our lives, that's what they call it, lives, spirits, and souls from all the sediment and blemish, and may it cleanse us and sanctify us with your exalted holiness. Now, isn't that interesting? Twice it says to go from Tuma to Tahara, from encrustments and contaminations to purity, and twice it says to go to purity and holiness. It's quite balanced. Furthermore, the first description is a description of what we are doing. You gave us this mitzvah, and when we do this mitzvah, we do this. We purify ourselves. After that, we say, may it be your will that in the merit of the mitzvah that I did, we should also be sanctified. Meaning, I didn't do that. The mitzvah didn't do that for me. I'm praying that you should respond to the mitzvah that I've done by elevating us to a level of holiness. Well, if there are two agents, maybe there could be a double transition in one day. There's a transition that we do through doing our mitzvah, and a transition that he provides by responding to our mitzvah. So if you read this carefully, I think you have a plausible explanation of how you can get 98 in the space of 49. Now, 49 gates of holiness, 49 gates of purity, 49 gates of defilement. I wonder. There's also something about 50 gates. Chamishim Sha'arei Bina. 50 gates of a certain type of understanding. And our sources say that Moses had 49. But not 50. Not 50. You held him back a little bit from being like an angel, being only flesh and blood. You held him back a little bit. You denied him one. So, we're climbing out of the 49 gates of defilement. We're becoming pure. We're also achieving, receiving a certain holiness that God projects onto us. Well, it isn't one for today, another one for tomorrow, another one for tomorrow, and the 16th day you have number 16 and all the 15 were lost. Each gate you go through, you're farther from the entrance. The effect of the gates accumulate. And what we're doing is providing a journey through 49 gates, taking the result of each passage with us and accumulating them till we accumulate a sum of 49. And then we can be worthy of, how shall I say, a temporary interaction with the 50th. We won't receive it, but we can have a temporary interaction with it. That's Matan Torah. When the Torah was given to us, when the heavens opened up, and we had a vision of how the universe is structured, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's energy coming into us from beyond the universe, we had that vision. We were taken beyond the 49 gates of understanding that human beings can achieve, and can possess, and can use in their reasoning and analysis and understanding. We're given a glimpse of something that's utterly beyond that. But it's passing through the 49 that makes it possible to receive the 50th, or to have a glimpse into the 50th. If you hadn't passed through the 49, you would be in touch with the 50th. So you're taking all of that with you, and that's why it's Hayom Shisha Yamim La'omer. Hayom Esri Ve'echad Yom La'omer. Not the 21st day, but 21 days. Because that's what you're doing. You're accumulating the upshot of these days. Now, so that's why the 50th day is really 50, because it's giving the capstone to the 49. Without the 49, it couldn't exist. That's why, really, the 50 is 49 plus 1. It's not a homogeneous 50. And so we have, again, the idea of 7 plus 1. Well, this is 7 times 7 plus 1. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to ask, I also see the formula in Hanukkah, but in Hanukkah it's kind of inverted because it's 1 plus 7, right? So 1 for the war and then the 7th for the miracle.
And that's interesting. That's very interesting. You're right. In Hanukkah it's 1 plus 7, in the other case it's 7 plus 1. Well, I'll tell you, Sukkot is 7 plus 1, and Shavuos is 7 plus 1, but Bris Milah is 7 plus 8. There's a 7 there, and there's an 8 there, and the 8 doesn't, you're forcing me to rethink about the way I said it. And in Bris Milah, it's not really the 8 splits up into 7 plus 1, but the 8 is built on a 7. The 8 grows out of a 7. And that's not quite the same relationship. That's a good point. I'll have to think about that, yeah.
Why is it that our being cleansed and sanctified seems to relate to this abundant bounty that flows in all the worlds?
Why is it that our being purified, I mean, only the sanctified, that comes at the very end, purity and sanctification, because I'll tell you something about Shavuos. I don't know if they're going to tell you this or they're not going to tell you this. The Gemara says that when Moses went up to Mount Sinai to receive the Torah, the angels complained to God, this is a mistake. This is a mistake. Give it to us. Don't give it to them. We'll do a much better job of keeping it than they will. So what? It wasn't just selfless. The one who keeps the Torah controls the flow of divine energy into the world. The angels are arguing that if you give us the Torah, it's going to be better for everybody. Even better for people. Because there'll be a bigger flow of divine energy into the world. So God says to Moses, answer them. And Moses says, they will incinerate me with their fiery breath. And God says to Moses, take hold of my throne and answer them. So he does. He says to them, you want the Torah? Let's take a look at what's written in it. It says, honor your father and mother. Do you have fathers and mothers that you have to honor? It says, remember that you were a slave in Egypt. Were you slaves in Egypt? It says, don't envy one another. Kinot. Do you envy one another? Isn't it clear that this book wasn't written for you? It was written for people. Gemara says the angels were overjoyed with his answer. They gave him presents. They were fully reconciled. Well, it's not exactly obvious why they were reconciled. What kind of argument he's giving them to change their minds. One way to put it, I forget from whom I heard it, could be that I heard from my Rabbi or heard from somebody else, put it as this. Moses' argument was precisely back to the angels in their own terms. You're right, whoever has the Torah controls the flow of divine energy in the world. But God wants the divine energy to flow all the way to the bottom. And we live in the mud at the bottom. That's where we live. And you don't live there. You're not designed to live there. You're much more exalted than that. You live in a position that's close to God. We saw in the book of Job, right? They come to report to God, and God gives them instructions, so on and so on. Human beings can't do that. He did it by appealing to their inherent qualitative superiority, but using the same idea, that the divine energy has to flow all the way to the bottom. And this is the implication of a Rashi that's really should be more famous, I would say. The Gemara says that there were two Tanoim who described how you should celebrate a holiday. One said every holiday day should be 50-50. 50% for praying and learning Torah, and the other 50% for banqueting. The other one said no. On the contrary, the day should be divided 90-10. Either way. 90% praying and learning, and 10% banqueting, or vice versa. Either way. However, the Gemara says, everyone agrees that at Shavuos, now listen carefully, it's not going to be what you expect. On Shavuos, it's forbidden to have 90% learning and davening and 10% banqueting. That's forbidden. Wow, really? Gee, if you'd asked me to design the holiday, I wouldn't go in that direction. You're celebrating the receiving of the Torah. What could possibly be a better celebration than learning Torah? Maybe we should fast the whole day and just learn Torah for 24 hours. Why would you say that 90-10, which is okay for Pesach, and it's okay for Sukkot, but it's not okay for Shavuos? Why would you say that? 90-10, where the 90 is learning and studying Torah. So, Rashi says, because, 9:37, okay, still fine. Rashi says, because you have to celebrate the holiday of Shavuos in such a way to show that it is noach to the goof, that the body is pleased with it, happy with it, feels comfortable with it. The body looks forward to it and integrates into it. And you spend the day 90% learning and davening, and only 10% for the meal, the body's going to be dissatisfied. And you can't do that on Shavuos. You can do it on Pesach, you can do it on Sukkot, but you can't do it on Shavuos. Now, that's quite a remarkable statement. You must please the body on Shavuos. Why? Why would that be so important? The answer is because if you don't, if you de-emphasize the body, put the body in back burner, God will say, so I'll give it to the angels. That's what they wanted. Your claim is you're getting it because you live in the mud. That's why you're getting it. Well, okay, then you got to pick up the mud also. You have to sanctify the mud also. The body has to be involved. So, that's the status of Shavuos. So now, the idea is it's the 50th day built on the 49 days. It's the day, the culmination of the 50 days. And I told you how Rashi reads the verse. He reads the verse. Sheva Shavuos Timos Tiena, 7 complete weeks. Ad mimocher as a Shabbos Shvius, until the day after the 7th week. Meaning, when you're counting the 49 days, you're counting 16 out of 50, 27 out of 50, 34 out of 50, not out of 49. I only want to count 49. Yeah, but you're building a 50-day unit. And the count of 33 is the count to build another element into that 50-day unit, not to get to the end of the 49 days of counting. That's not the purpose of 33. Purpose of 33 is to build the 50-day unit. And then it says, Tiena, Ad mimocher Shabbos Shvius Tisperu, until the day after the 7th week, count, comma. And then it says Chamishim Yom. The result is you have 50 days. So not Tisperu Chamishim Yom, you count 50 days. Rashi then changes the order of the words of the pasuk to make it clearer. But there is a tipcha on Tisperu. It stops. There's a stop there. So the count of 49 is to create 50, not to create 49. And it comes out that the 50th day is the result of 49 days that we count. Now, I want to add one more thing that the Arizal says about Shavuos and Shmini Atzeres. I told you the Midrash which says that Shmini Atzeres should be 50 days after the beginning of Sukkot, like Shavuos is 50 days after the beginning of Pesach. Obviously, the Midrash sees a kind of identity between Shavuos and Shmini Atzeres. That's why, Shmini Atzeres really should have been stretched out, like Shavuos is stretched out. There's another piece of identity, and that is there are no mitzvos for the individual Jew on either of those holidays. On all the other holidays, there's something for a Jew to do or not do. I would say it's something to do, in addition to things not to do, but it's something to do specifically for that holiday. But not for those two. Because the rhythm of progress in spirituality, says the Arizal, has two parts. It has a part of human activity and creativity, and then it has relinquishing control so that God can put a stamp on it that it should be permanent. It's a little bit like creating a design and then laminating it. You better keep your fingers off the paper while they're laminating it. Otherwise, you're going to get injured. You put on the colors and give it over to them, and they'll laminate it and give it back to you. Similarly, when you do something spiritually, there's a period of time after you finish with your creativity where you give it over to Kodesh Baruch Hu and say, listen, I made this. It has my abilities and my powers in it, but I'm human, and everything I do is finite, and my physical creations are going to rot, so certainly the things that I build are going to rot. You have to make it permanent. I'm telling you Shem Shmuel now, and he has two proofs of this idea, one of which is that when you come to Yerushalayim on the 3 pilgrimage festivals and you bring your sacrifice in the temple, there's a mitzvah not to go home right away. stay overnight. Go home the next day. What are you going to do in the nighttime? You're going to sleep, right? Right. You're going to be totally passive. You're going to give the whole thing over to Kodesh Baruch Hu and say, I'm still in your city. I'm still close to you. Put a seal on. Just like, says the Shem Shmuel, that we have a midrash that said when Yaakov left home, he spent 14 years in the yeshiva Shem Ve'ever, and he didn't sleep. Then he went to Lavan, spent 20 years there, and there the verses say that he didn't sleep. Vatidad shnosi me'einai. Sleep fled from my eyes. But in the night between, he slept. That's when he had the dream of the ladder. And the angels going up and down on the ladder. So I asked the Shem Shmuel, why did he sleep that night? Didn't he have enough to review from 14 years in yeshiva? Eh? No, he's making a major transition from yeshiva's situation to a situation of conflict with a person who's a cultural and spiritual enemy, and in his environment where he has all the power and all the influence, it's going to be a terrible strain, and so on and so on. So when you come to the end of a certain period, give it over by going to sleep. So you see that twice. Once with staying over in Yerushalayim and once with Yaakov. So this is what the Arizal is telling you, that there is this rhythm in spirituality, and Shavuos and Shmini Atzeres both share that aspect of giving over. So having finished the count and having elevated ourselves to the point of 49, and having received from above a measure of holiness with which we can go into this, to the Shavuos, we have to go in with a sense of surrender, not a sense of conquest and victory and staying up all night is only a few hundred years old. And from the point of view of Jewish history, 3,300 plus years of Jewish history, a few hundred years is a snap of a finger. If you think you're a hero for staying up all night, not everybody stays up all night. There are people who don't. It's not a halacha. The idea is to appreciate all of what was accomplished throughout the 49 days, and then give it over to Kodesh Baruch Hu and say, please make it something that I take with me when I leave the holiday. Okay, now you all preceded me. Now it's my turn.